Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Evo Geniuses Bleed Blue podcast. And as you can see, a little bit of a different setup here. Spent a lot of time on the Word doc. That's right, I said Word doc for the background because apparently really hard to get a color of blue with this background for some reason. So it took me a bit, but we got there. And yeah, we've got Current and Vorborg, former EG head coach. And yeah, going to be obviously talking about EG, talking about the past couple, past year or so, and then as well as Warburg personally and kind of him, his thoughts on the past, his thoughts on maybe the future, um, and yeah, so looking forward to a good discussion here. Current, anything you want to kind of
No, I'm
open
just
up
ready to
with?
get into it, dude. I wasn't in the last one, so I'm ready to get into this one, honestly.
All right. Well, um, yeah, I guess just real quick, kind of on topic. How would I guess how would you describe? I will say like you've done a lot of AMAs over the past week or so, and
Yeah,
also a lot of interviews with between you and Valens. Um, but
yeah.
I guess so. I'm sure you've had to talk about this quite a bit. But how would you describe your time at EG? Um, I guess and a little bit of a deeper question. You know, were you able to kind of when you joined EG as you obviously saw a vision with the project. Do you think that you were able to maybe not, obviously results were a little bit shaky, but maybe not, what were you able to do what you wanted to do? Or was there things that maybe didn't go the way you wanted to?
Uh, I mean, uh, over for like your first question, the
Sure.
like the year, very I learned a lot. I think I would describe it as that. As I've said in some of the interviews, I got exposed to a lot of different ways of thinking about the game, a lot of different ways of like thinking about how to build rosters and stuff like that. So definitely like broaden my horizon. I've used the word versatile a lot. I think I'm a lot more versatile now than I was before. I had kind of I had experience having success one way of playing Counter Strike. Of course, came with like Hooksy, Roy, and that kind of lineup incoming Flames, right? And now I got exposed to I would say especially Automatic, who obviously have had a ton of success in his career as well, and he's found success in different ways. So spending a lot of time talking to him, with him, and just discovering how we can do things differently because we also had a wildly different roster, right? Than the kind of roster I had coming Flames, different kind of weaknesses and different kind of strengths. So all that has been extremely insightful and helped me grow a lot. But in terms of if I got to do what I wanted, then the answer to that question is no. As the headline of the HLTV article says, that even before I joined EG, I pointed out that I didn't think that the roster made a whole lot of sense. Before I dive, I also did say this in the article, but that wasn't like highlighted as much. I think in most people's minds is that part of this is definitely also just the fact that I as a coach was very poorly equipped to deal with a roster that didn't have a lot of opinions. Let's say, I mean, you can like, opinions, initiative, leadership,
Hmm.
ownership. Like you
Mhm.
can put so many
Right.
different words on it, right? But there's like leaders and there's followers, I guess.
Right.
And I think like if, for example, a guy like Brehze, I think he's like the perfect example. People look at him and he's like, oh, he's a veteran, he's experienced. But Brehze is not a leader. He's not the guy that will like make a team great. He's not gonna be like, hey guys, we need to change this, we need to change this. Our approach here is bad. The way we're practicing doesn't make sense. Like he's not gonna do any
Mhm.
of that. But
Okay.
if you build all that around him and you
Right.
slot him in, like he's gonna
Yeah.
shit on people.
Hmm.
And like I am fully confident to this day he will still do that if he's put in like a good space. I mean, in practice, at least once a day, he does something where my jaw just drops, and like even even like at IM Dallas against FaZe, he had, if I remember correctly, he had like several rounds where it's just like, yeah, I mean, Vince just like won that round for us. So
Yeah.
he still has those capabilities, but everything around him was a mess, and he's not going to be the one that like makes sure it's not a mess, right? So that's why I think he hasn't showed what he's capable of. But so when I say like the team didn't make sense at the time, I wasn't as self-aware, I guess, because I just felt like the composition of players doesn't make sense. But in reality, looking back, it was like I had to be a part of that equation too. Like it could have made sense. For example, I mean, I've said to Soam as well that I think Malek would have been a much better coach for that team at the time than I was, because Malek, at least from, I mean, obviously, I don't hope he thinks anything ill of me saying this, but from my conversations with him, I talked with him, especially like leading into the Rio Major and stuff like that. It seems like he was way more comfortable and experienced in just like him and maybe one more on the team like sets a direction, and then that's what we go with. Where I was more used to a more like collaborative effort where like everyone is kind of, we're relying on everyone to say, hey, I think we could change this thing, hey, I think we can change this thing, the position I'm being put in here, I don't like, I think we could optimize it, and then like it ends up being like something we build all together kind of thing. um so so at the time when I joined EG, the idea kind of was, we'll take these first like 3 months or whatever, and then we'll like evaluate who are we gonna build on from the team, like the first season, 3-4 months, the Rio Major and so on, and then we would evaluate, bring in players that would make the team composition make more sense, maybe bring in more people that were more like tier 1 ready, proved, whatever you wanna say. But for different reasons, both you saw a lot of esport organizations like mass firing, some were like just closing down. So EG obviously didn't close down or anything like that, but they were still a little more hesitant maybe than they would have been at other points in time, which is totally fair. I mean, I understand that, right? I've ran an esports organization as well. Obviously, that ended up closing down a year after I left, but like that worry of like the worst thing we can do is spend to a point where we can't make it back, right? So it's better to just not spend that money if we aren't sure if it's a good idea. But also, of course, like availability, who's available. I mean, I've seen a lot of criticism in terms of why doesn't EG get better players or whatever, like, but it's not like Nico or Hunter or like Saiwu or something is like really excited to join EG, right? So that's a part of it too. And what I especially believe, but I mean, I think Soam agreed with me, is that we needed people that could solve this like core issue of our lack of leadership, initiative, etc. And that's also like, for example, like we never talked to him, but let's say like there was like a guy like Config, for example, right? He was a free agent at a time, but it was like, okay, he would probably be a firepower upgrade, but from what I've heard and know about him, and like I talked to some of his previous teammates and stuff like that, he wouldn't solve our core issues, let's say. So it's like, hey, do you want to like break the bank to get a guy that could maybe be a little bit of like a band-aid solution in terms of he would shoot more people, but he probably still wouldn't like solve the bigger issue that would make us an actual top team. So do you want to spend money on that without really getting to where you want? That's that's like the type of questions we had to ask ourselves, and in the end it wasn't like my decision, but I understand why these decisions were made, and I was in the loop all the way through when it came to like roster decisions, and like Soam would, Valens would like he would kind of like check off, like he would be like, like are you cool, are you good with this and this, right? And I always said, yeah, I mean, like I understand why we're doing this way, I still think we will have these issues, and he agreed and understood too, right? But it wasn't the way I had pictured it when I joined EG, right? Like I thought after 3 months we were gonna go out, and we were 3-4 months, we would be like super happy, of course, with some of the players. I'm not saying like we would just nuke the roster necessarily, right? And I don't want to like throw, because I truly don't believe this. Like as I said as well, I think all 7 players I guess I work with in EG, I think they can all succeed at tier 1 CS, but the composition in my mind just didn't make sense. And again, I include myself in that composition, looking back at least. So changes needed to happen at some point, and I thought we could make those changes faster, and probably maybe even more bigger changes, and like more proven players and stuff like that, right? Because I also think, especially at the time, I think I learned a lot the past couple of months, but especially at the time, again, I worked better with more opinionated players. So
Mhm.
so yeah, so it didn't really shake out at all the way I had imagined it in the beginning. For a ton of different reasons that I don't have like any ill feelings towards EG or Valens or anything, because again, like I was included in why everything went down the way it went down, and I understand the business side of things, and yeah, like it made sense to me all the way through.
Nice. Well, actually, so going off of that, you kind of answered my question that I was going to follow up with. Like, do you think it did just mainly come down to timing for different kind of signings and stuff? Because even the changes that were made, right, like bringing in Refrezh as of late, calling up Hex when he was called up, right, in that situation. I think a lot of people might have seen those as like that quote unquote band-aid fix, but were those moves more thought out, I guess, than what we see on the surface level of just the HLTV article and stuff like that?
I mean, Hext was, I think, like I was the last guy to sign on that roster. So I wasn't really involved
Okay.
with what the roster's going to be. I was a little bit part of like Hext, mainly just that I was okay with him being brought up. My main thing was just that I thought we needed someone that had energy and someone that was willing to talk. They were uh, like maybe like Masuda was gonna be in there or whatever, but I had heard that, again, I wasn't part of any of those negotiations, but I did reach out to some of his previous like coaches and players, and what I heard was he was like a super quiet player, and again, at the time that made like no sense to me with us having already some quiet players. So I was like cool with Hex being brought up. I was like, yeah, I mean, I don't mind us having like rookies. I don't mind, especially if in your period where you're like, okay, let's see who's worth taking a chance on. Then I'm like, sure, let's bring in rookies then, like, and let's see if they're worth taking a chance on. And if they're not, then okay, in 4 months we can sign someone
Yeah.
else, or whatever.
Okay.
Or in a year we can sign someone else or whatever, right? Like every break
Mhm.
you can look at it. So if we're in a period anyway where we're not necessarily expecting to peak, but we're just expecting to see what's worth betting on for the future, then yeah, let's bring in a rookie, right?
Yeah.
And it was a little bit of the same then when we brought in Wiz instead of Cirque.
Mhm.
It was like, okay, we Cirque has been struggling for a long time. Obviously, he's not the. I mean, I don't know what the players made in terms of salary and stuff like that, but I mean, I don't imagine. I mean, I'm pretty certain Wiz was making less money than Cirque, right?
Yeah.
So, so Cirque is like he's a veteran, but he's been struggling for a long time. We can't really like get his full like we can't really get his full performance out of him. He was he was just trying new stuff all the time, like this isn't working, this isn't working. So it's like, okay, it's probably also good for his career, honestly, to like get a reset of some kind. So it was like, is Wiz the savior that's gonna make us a great team? Probably not, but again, we're like in this process of evaluating, and Wiz is like, maybe he's gonna be a beast, maybe he's gonna like develop, because like we obviously saw potential in him. I still to this day see a lot of potential in him. So it was like, okay, let's take a chance. So I did say that we would probably be a little worse short term bringing him up instead of Cirque, but obviously potentially long term it can be like a great asset. And again, if it's not, then the idea was that potentially we'll look at change, right? Because EG needs to be like a tier 1 team. So if they aren't cutting it, then at some point we can look at changes, right? But
Mhm.
also like we felt Jarek was also like fit in a little bit playstyle wise. Cirque likes to like take a lot of risks and chances, and automatic especially that plays a lot of positions next to the AWPer.
Mhm.
It's not that he's like against playing aggressive, but I would say he's more calculated in the way he likes to approach the game. So that also was like a better fit with Wiz than it was with Cirque. So that was also like a part of it, right? And then Refrezh, I feel like was a move. Again, a lot of people like saying that, oh, like I deserve to be fired because I brought in Refrezh or whatever. Like I did support getting Refrezh,
Mhm.
but again, like it's not that I made these roster moves, but I did also support getting Refrezh. I thought it was good. I still to this day think it was a part of fixing a lot of our core issues. I think we had very little time with Refrezh, and almost all of it was like at 130 ping on practice.
Right.
And then of course, like some people like, well, he didn't have 130 ping at IM Dallas. Like, why wasn't he better? But like, you try and practice on 130 ping for a month and a half or whatever, and then go from one day to the other to low ping and then perform. Because like you peak different, you play different for like a month and a half or whatever on 130 ping, and then you have to and then suddenly you have to play on low ping, and that's super tough. So I think it was solving some of our core issues, getting Refrezh in, but with getting, and I would also at this same time, which is not necessarily something we planned, but that's just what happened. Nealan also really came into his own and became a lot more confident in his ideas and what he wanted to do. So Nealan became a much larger voice. Refrezh came in with a ton of ideas and things that he had previously done at Heroic and Sprout and stuff like that, right? And we were like working to incorporate all of these things that both Nealan wanted to do, Refrezh came in with, and of course, like me and Automatic still also had stuff that we wanted to do and opinions, right? So when you start doing this sort of style more, where it is more collaborative, that also just takes time, because when you have a lot of ideas, to me, over time you will be a much better unit, and you will be able to adapt really well to different situations that happen to you on the fly. But it requires this like period of time of talking and understanding each other's views and adopting some of each other's views and all that stuff, right? And again, we were just like low on time, I would say. So I did feel like we were becoming a better and a smarter team. But again, I mean, then we had IM Dallas, right? And we had a decent game against FaZe in the best of one. Then we played against Complexity, where we had done really well on Anubis in practice. Obviously, we got annihilated on our CT side, but it was basically to this one B execute they did like 10 times. And it was like a B execute on a timing that we had never faced in practice. Either people on practice went like fast in the round, or they went like pretty late. But they went on like a timing we had never faced. So they kind of like, we had been practicing playing like onside, play aggressive, like use our nades to be comfortable. And then after our nades are starting to run out, we would like start to fall back and play retake. But they kind of hit like in between that transition.
Right.
And obviously that's something you're supposed to be able to, I mean, we're supposed to be able to like destroy them, but when you're like quote unquote a new team, and Refrezh was like playing B with Nealan, and also Anubis is a new map, so we're still like figuring kind of out how to play it, right? But then once in a while stuff like that just happens. Someone does something to you that you have never practiced against before, you've never seen it before, and you just in the middle of the game we try to do certain things to like adapt, or right, but it didn't work. But obviously then like we would review after the complexity game, and then we wouldn't lose to that the next time we play, right? But that will happen sometimes, that you just get run over on one side of one map because you just haven't practiced against that. And then we went into overpass, which we probably should have won. Was like a decent map again. So the little bit of time we had to show what we can do on low ping, I think we did okay, but obviously like not good. But it was just like short amount of time, bad practice leading into the event, all that kind of stuff, right? So I did think that was a move in the right direction, and obviously I think EG were looking at making even more moves that would bring them closer to being a tier one team here in the offseason.
Yeah, well, that's great. It actually touches on kind of, because I do want to talk about the players um on this
Yeah,
team. And it kind of leads into, you mentioned Nealan being kind of coming into his own a little bit. You know, and I that was actually part of my question, which is just how has Nealan evolved as an in-game leader and as a person, kind of, obviously completely different culture for him having to get used to, and a new region, and even, different styles of play, having to change, roles with certain players, even roster moves. How do you think he's evolved, as a person and a player, and as like an in-game leader as well?
yeah. I think when we came into the team, he was like holding back. He wanted to hear what everyone else had to say, because he was like, outside of HexT, he was like the least experienced on the team. So he was like holding back a little bit more, and was a little bit more reliant probably on me and Automatic to like lead the charge. But I also think, I mean, it was also kind of rough for him, because I think he had periods of time where he like he tried more, but then sometimes maybe me or Automatic didn't necessarily agree, and that could also be like then I hit to confidence, right? In terms of and I guess if the rest of the team then rather wants to listen to Automatic than they want to listen to me, then like where do I stand as an IGL, right? And I think that's like a tough transition. And then I think leading into the start of this year in Blast, we had prepped really well, and I think we had some games where the entire team, but also Nealan as an IGL had like a tough time dealing with the pressure and the nerves, and we started calling a little different and playing different than we had done in practice, put us in different situations that we haven't really been in. And we had and the thing is like this happens in towards the end of Blast groups, but the issue is we have I think we had 2 practice days and then we played Katowice, so we didn't fix that in between that. We tried our hardest, and I actually think Katowice it was improved for Nealan and the entire team, but then we traveled. We had 2 practice days again, and then straight into the RMR open qualifiers. And then from those, we had 0 practice days and just traveled straight back to Europe to play EPL. So it was we had very little time to we all felt that we were on the right path, and practice was going really well. And practice results don't really matter, but we were playing against all the tier 1 teams, and it was close games. I don't think we lost to any top teams more than 17-13 or something. Obviously, again, the results aren't important, but it also it felt good. It felt controlled. It felt the things we talked about was actually taking place on the server. But then this span of 6 weeks happened. I think from the start of Blast groups to EPL being over is 6 weeks for us or something.
Right.
And that was the entire season.
Yeah.
And after we started playing games, I think we had a total of 5 practice days, right, to try to fix what didn't work. And we weren't able to in those 6 practice days and whatever, just talking about it while we're traveling or on game days and stuff like that, right? We weren't able to fix it. And then we stopped playing because it's okay, well, potentially roster moves are going to happen now because we missed the RMR and, everything sucks. We don't have any other tournaments. We have IM Dallas in 2.5 months or something. So I guess there was natural there would be an evaluation period, right? And then we ended up getting Refrezh. But that before we got Refrezh, that took some time. We started practicing a little bit with Refrezh and high ping. Then suddenly we get told we're going to the RMR. We haven't played with the HexT for a month or something, and we've changed positions and all that kind of stuff. He changed position on EG Black. He was already playing with the right. So then the process with Refrezh also, of course, gets interrupted or whatever, and we go and play the RMR, and then again we go into the rest of it, right? So it's and then Nealan, after that break, and when we came back with Refrezh after the RMR, I'm not sure from where, but he had just found he started working harder. It felt like to me he was before he was told things by the team, we like to do things this way, and it wasn't Nealan's way of doing it. So then it was he was kind of just trying to mimic 1-to-1 what he was told to do. But then I also think that was it was hard for him then to call it in official games because maybe he didn't truly feel confident in it, he didn't truly believe in it because it wasn't his, and that's super tough as a caller.
Yeah.
But after we had this break after EPL, he still listened to what the team thought was good and how they wanted him to call, but he worked super hard on making it his own. So he would he would show up and he'd be hey, I heard what you guys say, so how we're gonna do it is we're gonna do it like this.
Right.
So he made it his own instead of just trying to replicate 1-to-1 what he was being told by other people. And that was a big change, I think, in his level of confidence. And he would just be more vocal on what he thought was good, bad, what he wanted people to do, what he didn't want people to do. And I still think we had a few rounds at IM Dallas where we didn't do as we had agreed on or practiced or whatever, but it was way less of an issue. And overall, the last 2 months of the team, I thought Nealan was really coming into his own and really coming together as a strong IGL. So it is kind of sad that now he now you could see what he can become, but obviously we ran out of time, right? Probably a little too late, right? So that's kind of sad in a way for Nealan's progression. But I hope, of course, that he finds a team soon and he'll take all those listens with him, because again, if he continued the development, how much he developed in like the last 2-3 months, if he continues doing that, then he'll be golden.
Yeah, it makes it sound like, I just with all the, with everything that you've said, is there any, I guess, does part of you maybe were there discussions to keep this particular roster going for a certain, for I understand that it's kind of a weird spot because the CS2 major being next year, kind of now is when a lot of teams are making that decision to make roster moves so that they can have enough time to develop a little bit of chemistry. But was there any kind of thought of like, hey, maybe we're onto something here. Like, let's try to keep this going.
It was, I mean, it was super tough, right? Because we felt like we were close, and I know from the outside that might look ridiculous to some, because obviously we lost way more than we should,
Right.
and we lost to teams that we should never lose to. But eternally, it felt like we were close because again, like things we had really worked hard. It was really well thought out what we were doing in practice, and it worked really well in practice. Felt control, all these kind of stuff, right? And then for like pressure and all that kind of stuff, it fell apart when we played officials. Then you lose all your confidence because you keep losing over and over, and maybe a little bit of like motivation is lost and energy is lost because man, the travel schedule is absolutely brutal, and like we're traveling across the Atlantic Ocean and playing within 24 hours of landing on a new continent, and all that is like manageable if you're feeling good and you're winning. But when you're feeling terrible about losing, then that just like adds to it all, right? So there was definitely like all the way through it was like there are no pieces where we can just like point to that piece and be like, okay, well that guy just sucks, If you just get a new guy instead of him, we're golden, Because it was like everyone's actually trying really hard. Everyone's actually really easy to work with. Everyone is like trying their hardest to get good, and we see that we can get like it feels like we're so close, right? But at the same time, there's the other side of the argument. It's like, but it also just seems like insanity to just like keep because
Yes.
like yes, we felt like we've been close for like 10 months now, like for
Mhm.
how long are you okay feeling like we're pretty close, like it actually like so that was a super tough decision for Valens to make in the end, and the discussions were there to keep everyone, to keep 4 players, to keep like I think all the way to like keeping 0 or 1 player or something, right? I think Valens has been through all of the scenarios, right? So yeah, I mean there are discussions basically surrounding everything.
Right. Well, okay. So talking about like discussions, obviously, I think you had spoke on that you weren't completely involved with this off season, right? And some of the discussions and talk to. Could you shine some light on like the actual how concrete some of the rumors that come out are? Because obviously, within like a span of like there was that 1 week period in the off season, right, where like everything was just going, the system was shutting down, like everything was going haywire. We were apparently in talks with Electronic, Zorte, Liege, then we weren't in talks with Boros or Liege anymore, right? And obviously it's one of those things, right, where in the off season every team is evaluating, every team is probably going to talk to um, every player that is available or on the transfer market, right? So I'm just curious from, I guess, more the business standpoint and behind the scenes of how concrete were some of the rumors, I guess, if you know or if you're comfortable speaking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Valens also said in his interview with us too, right, that he was exploring a lot of parallel paths. I think is how he described it as, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, I also had a little bit of a back and forth with you, Fusion, on Twitter, where it was like, from the outside it looks like, oh, EG was talking to this guy, this guy, this guy, and then like it's been reported that it's like almost there, and then like then it falls apart. I was like, what? I thought you guys had these 5 guys, and that was like the roster that was gonna be. But I think in reality that's not necessarily how it actually played out. It was more so. I think EG was probably talking to like 15 players,
Right.
and they weren't, and like some of them were, you know, players that like made sense together, package solutions maybe, like let's get a core in of people that have like the same culture from here. Let's have but we're also exploring this. They were all like I knew from the get go also like promoting EG Black has been a thought that like goes back months. It's not like it was like just an emergency backup. Like shit, we don't what the fuck are we gonna do? Okay, I guess let's just we have these players in the back pocket. Like it's been an option that's been told to me, even though I wasn't gonna be. I mean, so Valens played with like open cards with me, and he was like, if we don't get a roster that makes sense, then these guys are doing good, and if we promote them, probably want to keep them together with their coach. So if that happens, then like I wasn't going to be part of the plan moving forward, which again makes sense. I don't I don't mind that, and I appreciated the honesty. And again, that this goes like months back that I knew that this could potentially happen. So I think for EG they just explored, like they were open to nuking the entire roster and building from scratch. And if you see that as an option, that obviously means that you should be talking to a ton of players, because like the world is your oyster, right? I think
Yes.
same with like if it's almost like if you don't even have a CS team, right? Like TSM or whatever, who's rumored to maybe wanting to go into CS. Like I can tell you as well, TSM have they've talked to 50 players, right? And 10 coaches, and like they talk to everyone, right? Because they're figuring out who makes sense, like both financially but personality, and what are the right combinations and all that stuff, right? So I think some of the people that were reported that EG talked to, they probably talked to, but they like I know they talked to like 10, 15 more outside of that, right? And also at the same time, like when it was reported that like like there were some of the players that were reported that like they were locked in.
Yeah.
I don't have full information, but I was like, there's no chance in hell from like the bits and pieces of information that I have that this is locked in. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. And obviously they weren't, because like nothing had been signed, right? So yeah. I
Okay.
think it was a very busy off season for Valens.
Yeah, it definitely it appeared so, at least from the outside, that
Yeah.
it was definitely like that. Yeah, I just think that's crazy because from an outside perspective, right? For people that aren't in the scene, right? If you talk to players or coaches like yourself, or people that are in the scene or with a team or an org, they really know what's going on, right? And all we're pretty much left it with is HLTV articles, Dust2 articles,
Sure.
and I think it's kind of hard to not get one excited, or two even just like believe it, right? Because we don't have that inside source of what's actually going on. But that's really interesting that that's how that kind of actually broke down.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily like I guess some of the reports said like it was a done deal or something, and I guess those reports were not true. But I mean, I've as a journalist, right? Like they hear, maybe even they hear from the player themselves, so they hear it from like a ton of different. I mean, some players are using it as leverage as well, right? Like one team approached you and you're like, yeah, I could be interested, but I'm also talking to these guys and these guys and these guys, right? And then that like spreads,
Yeah,
and some
just
players,
spirals out, and
yeah, and some players are talking to some other players because they're like, hey, I got offers from both these guys and these guys. Like, what do you think I should do? And then some of them are friends with other, right? So maybe you hear from like 3 different sources that Jax is talking to EG or whatever, right? Or maybe even heard it from him, or whatever, right? So it makes sense to report on it. And I also think most of the reports were probably true of like who EG were, if not all of them. But it's still only, even though they are true, that like they're talking to them, they're maybe even talking about salaries, they're maybe even talking to the teams about like buyouts. That's still only part of the picture, right? Because I mean, in all like last offseason, for example, before I joined EG, I talked salary with 7 different teams, right? And they probably also talked salary with 7 different coaches. So that didn't mean that like if it was reported like that I was talking to X team, that would have been true. But it was like it's a very small part of the entire picture of what actually going on, right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, kind of speaking of on kind of some of these EG Black's roster kind of getting moved up. Player in particular that you've worked a lot with is obviously HexT. And I feel as though HexT has kind of he's been in a lot of different positions over the past year or so, especially like just from a role perspective. And also just in terms of what he's experienced just as a person over the past little while. What do you think, I guess, would be, or maybe you're hoping, or just based on your experience with him, what do you think might be different with HexT this time around, kind of jumping into the tier 1 space compared to his previous attempt?
Yeah, I think what I'm hoping to see, and something I've seen in a lot of players before, is sometimes players take a step up and they go into a higher tier than what they've usually been playing. And when they take that step up, they come into a team and they're like the least experienced player. They might be the youngest player in the team. And they are kind of in this position where they doubt themselves a little bit more because they're like, okay, well, shit. I mean, these guys know way more about Counter Strike than I do. So I shouldn't be making too many decisions. I should just like listen. I should just like soak in. I should just be a sponge, right? And you are supposed to, of course, learn from people that are smarter than you. But it can be a hard transition to go into a team, probably get a lot of criticism and a lot of feedback on how you're playing. Not that criticism is like a bad thing, right? But it's not that his teammates on our team was like telling him that he's shit or anything, but he did get the most criticism because he made the most fundamental mistakes because he was the least experienced, right? So when you get a lot of criticism, you obviously have the opportunity to improve a lot fast, but it can be hard to truly trust yourself and play with confidence while you're also being criticized a lot. So it's like a tough balance to strike.
Right.
So what I've seen a lot is that like people get their chance at tier 1, they learn so much, but they have a very hard time actually putting all that new knowledge to work because they're still in like a little bit of an awkward spot confidence wise and all that stuff. So then sometimes when they take a step back, now they can truly apply all the things that they learned in tier 1 because now they feel confident. Like now they're the most experienced on whatever team they might be. Obviously Rush is more experienced than Hex, but you come in and you feel a little bit more empowered in a way because like now you are coming with some knowledge, like now you have experience, and then you can like truly like just use all the knowledge you have, right? Like test it out and do it in different ways, and you feel like you have the freedom to do whatever the hell you want, right? And then that can like really accelerate a player's career. And again, it's something I've seen happen time and time again. And I'm hoping that it's gonna be the same with HexT, because I'm like, even though again, like I think he had a good time on our team, and I don't think we were like being mean to him or we bullied him or whatever. I think he was integrated well into the team, but he's still 100% like more confident in his own skin on the roster that he's in right now than he was in that entire experience he had before. Both because he's played with them for a longer time, he's more equal from the beginning of the team in terms of like how much do you have to like say like in the pecking order or whatever, and also he has tried his hand at tier 1 tournaments before. He's had time to reflect on what worked for him and what didn't work for him. So I mean he's set up for at least individual success way more this time around than he was the first time. So I'm really excited to see him play.
Yep. One kind of thing, actually this was around the same time when, you guys were going to the major and obviously Hex was on the team, but obviously I think within the period of end of last year and beginning of this year, I think Malek's, well, I don't know if his role actually changed, but his title did. I think I don't remember what his original role was, but it changed to a consultant. And so I
Yeah.
guess I was just kind of, I don't recall there being any kind of like announcement or anything for that, but I was just wondering, I guess, how involved was Malek? Obviously, I know, that he was kind of helping all the teams. But in terms of how involved was he with the main roster? Was there I don't know if I want to call it a preference to the main roster, but I guess how involved was he, during your tenure?
In the beginning, his title was strategic coach,
Right, that's what it
and
was. Yep.
and the idea was kind of that he was gonna I guess like helping the team out with some of the like strategic stuff and stuff like that. But for different reasons, he was unable to really like commit full time, and also like we spent a lot of time in North America. He was in Europe, and I mean, that was just like tough for him to be there for practice days and stuff like that. So at some point, we decided that it didn't really make a lot of sense to have a guy that should be helping a lot out when it comes to like how we're supposed to approach the game if you aren't really there in like you're unable to be there in practice every day because things move very fast, so that would be super hard. So he, even when he was a strategic coach, he also still did help out the other teams too. But we kind of transitioned him more into like I guess the title he used was consultant, where he was helping the other teams. I think he spent more time on the other teams than he did on our team, but we could kind of use him as a just like if you had any thoughts or we ran into some issues. I know Automatic would sometimes watch demos with him. We asked him some questions sometimes like, hey, we're playing against teams that are just playing like super fast and just rushing everywhere. Like do you have, outside of like using your nades fast, do you have, like any experiences with what has helped your teams in the past? And just like you can just ask him like questions here and there, right? And then we used him to have like, I think it ended up being like bi-weekly-ish conversations with Nealan about how to like convey his thoughts better and like empower him more. So just like running some projects with players right on the side, but like in the day to day he wasn't like there for practice or stuff like that, but he was just a resource we had available to us if we felt like we needed some like a different, I guess, just view on matters and stuff like that, right? And then I know he worked more closely in terms of like sitting down with the entire team when it came to the EG Black, EG White, and EG Gold.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
To follow that, I guess I know you and Valens have talked about it a lot. Everyone's kind of roles. Looking back now, do you think it was a case of too many cooks in the kitchen, quote unquote, right? Like, because a lot of people, I'm sure, are still confused, right? Because you guys had, you had Malek, you had Valens, you had Axe, you had Munster, you had, Sheikh Zilla. Yeah, I guess you can count Mao Cal. He was more of a team manager, though, right? So, but in terms of that, I mean, it sounds like all the roles were like pretty well defined, but at a certain point, I guess the better question would be like, do you think there's just too many minds going on for the success of possibly one team or two teams, right?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think it is heavily exaggerated, or maybe just because like the titles were confusing or something. Because everyone is like saying, yeah, you had Malek, you had Valens, you had Mad Cow, and I was like Valens is just like, he's not there day to day. He's just like every single team has a GM or a sports director. So, I mean, like, but you're not when you're counting who G2 has helped their team, you're not counting their director of esports or whatever. But for some reason, you're counting Valens, and like he's not here day to day. But people also listed like, oh, you have Tommy, you have Joe. It's like they're coaching completely different teams. They've
Teams,
never.
yeah.
I mean, that's just like again, if you take like Mouse, you're not counting Mouse next head coach as a coach that's
Right.
helping their team, because like no, he's not. The
But
only
with
thing is,
EG, they will though. Don't worry.
yeah. So it's like in the beginning when I started, it was, I guess we also had Hepa as an analyst, but he also transitioned into a role where again he helped more the academy teams and worked on with the like data science team on EG is working heavily on data science and how that can like in the future can improve a lot of stuff. So he worked way more on that. So in the beginning it was like me and Malek, but there was definitely a case of like we didn't execute it as well as we could, and we initially thought it would work in a different way than how it did work, but that took like 3-4 months or whatever, and then we changed how things worked. So then we hired Alan Sheikh Sula, and then from January this year, it was only me and Sheikh Sula who was like, we were the ones working with the team day in and day out. And I think that's pretty standard for most
Yeah.
teams, that you
Right.
have at least two guys. A lot of people have even more. Some have like a mental coach that's traveling around with them. Some have both an assistant coach and an analyst and stuff like that. But like it was just me and Alan. So I think two guys around a team is definitely not too much. And obviously, yeah, we did also have Mad Cow Nate, but again, yeah, he was like a
Team
team manager,
manager.
right?
Yeah.
He wasn't involved in like coaching the players or how we played the game. We did use him. There was one time at the RMR where it was like super packed schedule and like you get your opponents and then you have to play after 3 hours and stuff like that, right? And you're just in the studio. So we did use him to anti-strat a little bit for us in some cases like that, but just like day to day, again, we were like for most of the time in the beginning, it was just me, and then for most of the or like all the time here after New Year's, it was me and Shake.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, you touched on something that I've noticed over the past couple of months, and something that I was interested about to hear from you. I've listened to quite a few of I believe it's the HPE podcast that EG's been doing regarding their statistics and how they implement them into their different esports divisions. And
Yeah.
I guess, part of my concern was always just kind of, I think statistics are great, obviously, depending on how you're able to use them. But sometimes, are you missing out on some of the eye test things by focusing too much on statistics? So one thing that I was wondering was how often are statistics used, at least while you were on EG's team? Was that something that changed over the course of your tenure there? And how do you think,
We
they should be used?
Yeah, I mean, we barely used any data science at all because I think both me and Valens agree that the data science is something you put on an already well-functioning team, and we
Right,
never achieved being a well-functioning team. So if we were to try and introduce like a ton of data science,
right,
like our game didn't make sense. It's something you use to like optimize
right.
your practice patterns and like your in-game patterns. And I mean, EG is on their way to create something amazing in my book in terms of like what is possible with the data. But yeah, again, like you need to have a functioning team and then you can start working that in. So we spend little to no time on it whatsoever.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh, go ahead.
No, I didn't have
I,
anything. I was
Oh,
just.
okay.
I
Sorry, I
mean,
thought you were gonna say something.
like obviously I can't comment too much, but from
Right.
what I've been told, they've used it more on EG Black and EG. I think they actually use it the most on EG Gold,
Oh,
Gold.
okay.
because that's like I guess it's like they are okay to experiment a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
on their team.
Mhm.
So I think they've been trying to see how they can apply it a lot with them too. But for our team, it was just like, hey, let's try to like crack the code on like how to deal with pressure and get a playstyle everyone buys into and all that stuff, right? So if we had achieved with that, then I think we would slowly start to incorporate. Because I think with data science and basically anything, also like getting like mental coaches, performance coaches, like the more like I'm actually a firm believer that at some point we will have like very big like staffs around the team, like a lot of people around the teams. But it's not something you can just like you can't just hire from one day to the like just hire 12 people and then like because it
Doing the
needs to be
work,
like
right?
yeah, you need to like build a foundation. Okay, this works. These 5 players with these 2 coaches, and obviously if you just change one player, that's fine. It doesn't like tear down the entire foundation. But you have like ways you work, ways you practice, way you play the game that's kinda locked in. Obviously can change a little bit from time to time. Then maybe you can like introduce um like if you're starting like the small, now you introduce like fitness or like workouts. Now you introduce a mental coach. Now you introduce and you just build on top. But you only do like one thing at a time to work it in. Make sure we use it optimally. Make sure that whoever's leading the charge, he's like comfortable at understanding when do we spend time on what, and the players getting used to it. And then when that becomes second nature, and everyone, yeah, that's just like the way we do things. Then you introduce another thing, and then you go again, and you go through that same thing over and over, right? So, but I mean, in my book, why don't we have at some point we should have like an op coach, we should have a alert coach, we should have a map control coach, we should like whatever, right? Anchor coach. Like I don't see a reason why we at some point we don't have people that because most teams now like record their practices with POVs from every player. And one thing that I've had on my mind is just like and sometimes we had like Alan do this where he's just being told, hey, on Inferno, the guy that needs the most help right now is this guy. So you just only watch his POV.
Right. Yeah.
And when we're done with the practice, you have very detailed feedback to him. And if he sucks at Inferno, it's like, because if you need to improve on your Inferno, then it's like, okay, let me go back. And then you like have to watch the entire demo through. Obviously, you can like skip and, oh, there's an eco, go next, right? But But how much more efficient is it? Let's say you practiced the last week, you practiced 8 Infernos. How more efficient is it if you already had a coach just write down from those 8 practices, maybe there's like 9 rounds you have to look at and think about and could be optimized. Having to go through 8 demos to find those 9 rounds versus here it is, 9 rounds, like progression is just so much faster, right? So I can definitely see how like more people at some point will be very beneficial.
Right. And speaking of more people, obviously EG, when this whole thing kicked off, came under maybe a little flack, right? Because they kind of wanted to do something that was never really done. I mean, we'd seen academy teams before. We hadn't really seen them in North America, right? And obviously academy teams in Europe have been doing pretty well, but with the Academy League and everything. In your eyes, now that you're obviously not with EG and you've taken a step back, and you were mainly with you were just head coach for the main team, right? Do you think we should have seen more implementation of some of the other rosters? I mean, obviously Hex got the call up when you joined and you guys called up Wiz, but I think a lot of people have been wondering, like, EG White didn't really get any use a whole lot besides maybe a couple tournaments. And after Junior got brought into Black, maybe he should have been brought in for Wiz. This whole thing started off with 10 extra players, and we were kind of told fluid 15-man lineup, but we never really saw that come to full fruition. So I guess in your opinion, what do you think?
I mean, if it depends on the context, I guess. If you, I can't remember the initial statements because it's also like prior to my time, but if the context is it's supposed to be a fluid 15-man roster, then I mean that wasn't utilized very much. But I also think that would have been a horrible idea if you did that. So and to me, promoting 2 players in the span of like 6 months or whatever, I think that's I mean, you can't really ask for more. I feel like I think saying that EG, like, why do you have this talent pipeline you don't use is like 2 players given the chances. Like, I mean, it was even like in the span of like 4 months, 2 guys were promoted. I feel like that's can't really ask for more. And now they promoted 4. So I mean, it's like in the span of 10 months they promoted 6 players now. So I feel like that's I mean, I guess I think that's even more than Mouse. Like I think EG is the team now that's promoted the most academy players in the entire world. So
there you go.
So I don't feel like they've been underutilized at all. And as I said, like there's a lot of people that are like, why isn't George being promoted? Like why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And I've said it before, but if you feel like the core issue of a team is lack of ownership, initiative, like people that have strong opinions about what we're supposed to do, the answer is not to promote an academy player. He's not gonna come in to play at a level he's never played at before and then have all the answers to what we're supposed to change, right? Like his job, if you're being pulled up from academy, your job is to be a sponge. You're supposed to like give a ton of energy and like that grind mentality and potentially good aim and stuff like that, right? But your job is not to be called up and then be like, hey, our issue is that you need to fix that, like we're not on the same page all the time. That's a rookie's not going to do that. And that's like one of the reasons why Wiz didn't perform is because he was pulled up into an environment that like wasn't settled. I mean, and you're supposed to come in as like when rookies have success, it's because they come into a system that already makes sense. It's set. It's like a good environment for you to prosper in. You're surrounded by some veterans that can like help guide you, but the veterans we had less energy and time to guide them because they were working on figuring out how do we make the big picture make sense, right? So if we already had a core of like me and 3 players and we had a play style and we knew how to execute and everyone's on the same page, we knew how to call it, we were confident when we went into official games, and then you bring up 1 or 2 rookies, that would make sense, right? But when everything is a mess, like a rookie is not the answer to like fix that, right? Of course you can like I guess embrace the mess and just be like, fuck it, let's just get as much firepower as we can. We don't really know what the fuck we're doing, but let's just try and like click heads. And I mean, we can like you can make upsets then, but like you will never truly be a consistent great team. And there are some teams out there that like have done way better than EG that to me aren't like they aren't good teams or great teams, but they're just like they just have a ton of firepower and they like make upsets, but they also like lose to really bad teams. So and we were like trying to see if we could at some point build a good / great consistent team, right? But obviously we never got to that point.
Right. I think it's always just, in my opinion, I think it's always just interesting, right? How surface level a lot of the community kind of sees things, right? Because obviously you've talked about it a lot, how important like team composition is, right, and chemistry, and it's not just you slot one for one, right? You can't really do that, especially nowadays, right? And but I just think it's so funny how a lot of people will be like you said, like, oh, like George shouldn't be out of here, George for Brehze or anything like that. But when you just peel back that kind of surface, right, it's a lot deeper than what
Yeah.
most people probably think about.
We've gotten a lot of criticism over the past 10 months, a year I've been here. Most of it is warranted, 80% of it. I mean, if I just see a guy just write like, you guys suck, then I'm like, yeah, okay, that's fair, because we did. But also some of it I find ridiculous. Yeah, so there's been that last like 10-20% that just like, this just makes sense. Like, for example, like EPL pulled up that graphic with everyone that's like employed at EG and be like, why are you so bad if you have 9 coaches? And it's like, this guy works with the academy. Like what? Like we could pull up the exact same graphic for Navi. Navi have like 3 academy teams. They have like 12. Like it doesn't, like it doesn't make any sense to like start talking about academy coaches as like there's too many cooks in the kitchen, or like, oh, they have all these resources, but like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. And yeah, I've also heard some people say if they were hired in my position, they would have fired people that are the ones that have hired me, which doesn't make any sense either. And yeah, a lot of very, very ridiculous stuff has been said that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
But obviously, most of the criticism has been warranted because yeah, we've sucked. So
Yeah, I mean, people were flaming just about anything you could if it had EG's brand attached to it. I think part of it, I think it has to be said, kind of has to, and this isn't related to you, but I think part of it falls on EG just being, I think, look, I think the reason why maybe people were pointing toward the coaches, even if they weren't even associated with the main team, has to be, like Current said, kind of advertising that this was going to be some kind of fluid roster and emphasizing, no, it's a 15, there's no main team. It's just, they're all just different things and people can get swapped around and, technically someone from EG Gold could move up to EG Blue and, all this stuff. But I mean, look, people were just flaming just about anything. People were flaming the podcast idea, which I thought would have been pretty. I think that's a really cool idea. And that's coming from someone who creates podcasts on the team,
yeah.
But yeah, it's just it is a little bit kind of absurd.
Yeah, I'm unsure if that's ever gonna see the light of day now. I
Yeah,
don't know if it makes too much sense.
We were
Like they'll
literally
probably make
talking
other
about this
ones,
before.
but
yeah,
yeah, it's just, I mean, like, it's not up to me, and I don't have
right.
any information. But
Right.
it's just like we talked a lot about like why the team didn't work out, but also then like to build on that sort of team, like what was gonna be the ideas moving forward, right? And obviously he's not building on that team, so
Yeah.
I don't know if it will ever be released, just because the information is kind of
It's
kind of
dated now,
whatever.
right?
But
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah,
yeah. Like it wouldn't hold a lot of value, I feel like, to the
right.
listeners anyway. So
Right. You'd have to watch it in the context of like it was recorded prior to everything that's already happened. And
yeah, obviously also
Especially
I was the head coach at the time, right?
right.
So we were talking
yeah.
about my ideas and stuff like that, and obviously now I'm
Yes.
not involved with the
No,
team,
now
I
so
was gonna say, I think
like
the whole premise of
yeah,
the podcast was to talk about what's going on in terms of the team at that state and time and stuff. So yeah, it
yeah,
would be kind of tough. Um,
yeah.
one thing, I guess this is kind of going back to how EG liked the style of play. How did you feel, or what maps did you guys? I talked to you. I think I might have brought this up the last time that we talked about Nealan's play style, but I've been trying my best to keep up on, hey, what does EG's map pool look like over different periods of time and whatnot. What maps did you guys feel best on? I mean, I think obvious ones are that come to mind are just like Overpass and even Nuke for a while was up there. Um, why do you think those particular maps maybe fit the play style the best? And which ones, why were certain maps kind of leaned more into how you guys like to play?
Yeah, I mean, it was very like touch and go. I feel like, and at some point, some maps like Overpass for a long time, especially the beginning of a team, was just like a staple for us.
Right.
But then like we had so many issues on our overpass T side. We've been working through like overpass T is the side we've discussed by far the most when it comes to like playstyle and stuff like that, because we had some T sides that like fell flat. I think our overpass CT was solid. A lot of overpass CT is it's not only B, or sorry, it's not only A, but A is very important. And
Yes.
I think now the meta has shifted a little bit towards like a lot of T's being playing more heavy towards B. But still, then if you can get the information on A, it's just so important, because like A is where the map control is. B is like, obviously the CTs can't go out and like take short or water or whatever you call it. But most of the time it's like CT, you're just playing B side, so you're not really fighting for map control per se as much on B. You're fighting for map control on A. And automatic is just super comfortable playing overpass. It's like one of his his best maps, and he's playing on A. So honestly, our CT sides has mostly just been super solid because automatic is super confident on playing CT. RT was very, sometimes we got a lot of rounds, sometimes we absolutely sucked. Even in practice, it was just like nothing made sense. We couldn't get anything going. So at some points in time, we lost a lot of confidence in our overpass. But yeah, we spent a lot of time trying to fix it, because like we knew we had a pretty good CT side. So if we can just get a serviceable T side, then it should be a stable. But towards the end, we did very well on Mirage. I felt like our T side Mirage felt very comfortable for us this year. CT side was though a little bit more varying, but we felt like we fixed a lot of that. I think especially after we got Refrezh on the team as well, that gave us like an extra voice when it came to how we want to fight mid control and stuff like that. So I think that helped us a lot. Introduced like some philosophies as well that helped us on CT on a lot of different maps. Just like small keywords we could say, and then we understood what we were trying to achieve, like just one word, and then all 5 understood what we were trying to do. And we used that a lot. And then Ancient is one of our least practiced maps all the way through, but somehow we always felt like we did good in practice and officials when we played it. But we were kind of a little too chicken to commit to like picking it in a lot of games. And Anubis kind of ended up feeling a little bit the same. It was like, damn, like we're destroying everyone in practice on Anubis. Like we're like, this is it used to be like everyone was like winning on T side on Anubis in
Yes.
practice and officials. Now people are starting to get like more rounds on CT as well. But we were like, damn, like we're capable of like both getting 11 rounds on T, but we can also get 11 rounds on CT now. But it was still like a less practiced map, and people are not as comfortable just because it's like a newer map or whatever. But we finally stopped being chickens, and we picked that against complexity, and then we got our asses handed to us. So, and then with the newer roster, we almost didn't practice nuke, and we sucked at nuke. So that was down there towards the end, but it was more so like a matter of what we just had practice, right? And then I think most of the players liked Inferno. So I think it's like tough to say why or whatever, but it's just like sometimes things click. I think on Mirage you can. Mirage and Anubis are one of those maps where you can like call out a spawn what you want to
Yes.
do, and everyone knows the direction, and it's nice and easy. Then I would say. Personally, that's why I don't like the maps, because I prefer maps where you can't just say B execute, A execute, A split, B split, and it's just like it doesn't matter too much what the CTs are doing. Like you can still pull off the strat. Obviously, they might be positioned well against the strat, but you can like run the strat. I prefer maps where it's like, okay, we have to take some map control, and then we can figure out what the hell we're doing. But yeah, I mean, so those work pretty well for us, and then yeah, I mean, CT side, I think it's just about like what we spend the most time on, what we put in the most work on. But probably Mirage and Inferno were probably our best maps towards the end, and then Overpass and Anubis Ancient were all serviceable, but a little touch and go, and then Nuke was left in the dark.
All right. Yeah. I guess you know, kind of wanted to, I guess, learn a little bit more about Wiz. I think obviously, probably surprisingly to me, at least I wasn't really anticipating to see this much criticism for Wiz, but I think he got a lot of criticism over the past, for I guess his tenure on the main roster. Um,
Yeah.
you know, I personally believe quite a bit of it was unjustified. But that's also coming from, I watched him a lot in EG Black at the end of last year, and he looked really, really good. And so I guess just kind of wanted to know more. Was this really just a mental thing? Obviously, he did come into a really poor period of time to be a new EG player, and just naturally being especially being an AWPer from North America, coming, a region that typically doesn't have very strong AWPers, going into the tier one space is just naturally difficult. Was this something that was a mental thing entirely? Do I guess, what are your thoughts on him, and hopefully, you know, will he be able to regain some confidence maybe, and will we be able to maybe see him in the future?
I hope so. I think Wiz is a very smart individual. He's like he thinks things through. He like understands stuff that you tell him. He's just like a logical person that's like smart. He's like good at everything he he tries to. I mean, like when we had extra time at boot camps or tournaments, something we went out, he would just like he didn't like play poker, but then he just signed up for a poker tournament, and then he just came back and he won first place or whatever, and then
I've heard the infamous Jarek poker story.
yeah, it's just like,
A
and then
couple
like
of them.
yeah, he's pretty good at chess. Then he's
Huh.
like we played some games where we got some tennis balls or something, and we were trying to like hit water bottles far away, and he was just apparently he was like a pitcher in baseball too. It was just like it's just like like everything we like try our hands at to like compete a little bit outside the game. Jerry was just he's just good at it. And again, like he's super smart. So it was definitely like it's a combination for him that he was put into an environment that's not great for a rookie to perform in. I think he would have had a way better chance again if the team had their shit together when he joined. That would have been way easier. Because I think I had a period of time where I just like I talked to him every day after practice, and I saw like the progression that he was making. But then Refrezh joined, and I didn't have like time to do that all the time because we had to like work on the big picture stuff, and I had to like prioritize that. So, but it's like a combination of confidence and him being like way too nice. Like sometimes I'm like, we've talked for an hour or something, and then I'll talk to Jarek afterwards and I'll be like, why didn't you say anything for that hour? And he's like, well, you guys were talking, and I figured, like my thoughts probably aren't as important as you guys' thoughts, and you have more experience than me. So I was just like, and I was just telling him over and over, like, that's complete fucking horseshit, bullshit. I mean, we can't use that for anything. Like, if you have something on your mind, then like speak up. Like make sure that you're providing value to the team. And he did improve. Like in the beginning, he was just like, we would go through some stuff, and then maybe he didn't like catch 100% why we would do it, but he would just do it on the server, and in his mind he was just like, yeah, I guess I'll figure out why it makes sense at some point. But then that would
Mhm.
it's so much harder to get a lot of kills in a round if you don't understand why the round looks the way it looks. Because
Right.
like let's say on T, we're doing stuff in a certain manner, fashion, order, timings to try and trick the CTs into doing certain things. And if you don't understand what we're trying to trick the CTs into doing, it's hard to kill the CTs. But if you understand what timing you're supposed to be afraid of, what timing makes sense for the CTs to push, where it makes sense for them to push, then it's easier to kill them
Right.
because
Mhm.
Yeah.
they will push sometimes. Sometimes they won't, but when they do, if you're like very ready for it, yeah, you're just gonna kill them. It's an easy frag, right? So it's like you have to ask more questions. And then it was like, well, I don't want to waste everyone's time with like my questions because I don't understand it. And I'm like, again, you have to. I mean, and at the
Mhm.
very least, if you don't, then like write down your question and make sure you send it to me afterwards. Then like because now you just end up not answering. And towards the end, he improved a lot in these aspects. He would like have thoughts on what we were doing. He would ask a ton of questions, which I was very happy with. And we had that one boot camp before IEM Dallas,
Yes.
Mhm.
and he was an absolute beast in practice. I was like, it is very tough to perform when you have like as a team when you have an op that doesn't kill other people. It's just like
Yes.
every team that's
Mhm.
performing to like more than what's expected of them, quote unquote, they have an AWP that shoots a lot of people. It's very rare that a team is successful without having an AWP that like shoots a lot of people. There are a few cases you can point
Right.
to, but it's very rare.
Mhm.
So it was of course like an issue that Jarek didn't shoot more people, but of course it's like why doesn't you have to work on the why, right? Not just. But I messaged Soham like 5 days into that boot camp, and I was like if Wish keeps doing this, then we're good. It's fine. we don't have to worry about anything. Like it's all good. I asked him like what he was having for breakfast and stuff like that, because he was just like a beast and started to take like more initiative and stuff like that. But then he would sometimes have, especially if we played like against NA teams online, I think that's probably where he had like the hardest time.
Mhm.
And sometimes like the first map on LAN, like just had to like get used to sitting in the studio again and a little bit of jitters, right? But it is definitely like he needs to just like think less. Sometimes he can like overthink situations. Sometimes he can like second guess himself a little bit too much, right? And sometimes, yeah, he needs to grow more of an ego and stop overthinking shit and just like trust his gut feeling, because like he's so smart. He's mechanically skilled. Um, just when he joined the team, I I told him that like I was saying like damn, like you just never missed the easy shots, and then for the next 3 days he missed all the easy shots because he just like me telling him that just got in his head somehow, and he was just like what? That's like so much pressure, like he expects me to never miss an easy shot. So we had like this running joke that you can like never compliment Jarek with anything. We were at the Top Golf one time,
Mhm.
and me and him were battling for the win. So I just started telling him he was so fucking good at golf, and then I won. So it was easy. But yeah, it's like I can definitely see him succeed at like a high level. And if I was to build a North American roster right now with like whatever is not on EG, complexity, and liquid, he's like easy pickup right away.
Mhm.
But preferably with because he's a little bit more on the quiet side, but that's fine if you just have like the right pieces around him, right? So, but he would be an easy pickup for me. I think his potential is extremely high, and there are some things that he needs to work on and he needs to fix. But if he fixes those, then yeah, his talent is very very big.
That's really good to hear, honestly. I kind of want to shift away from EG and more North America in general, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Especially since you have that kind, you're from Denmark, you have that EU background, obviously. Um, with Liquid going the EU core, um, in your eyes, how do you see like the NA scene as it is right now? I mean, because you really only have EG right now that just promoted Black, and you have Complexity, who only have technically like three North American players, right? Because they got JT and Halzerg. So in the grand scheme of things, in your eyes, is NA as bad as like it's joked about on Twitter and like it seems?
Yeah, I mean, NA isn't that bad. No, I think again, like in EG, I think we got close. Like we're supposed to be a lot better, right? And I think complexity has improved over the last year. I think the year before they were more of a joke, and now they're like a team that can upset. And Liquid obviously is supposed to be like part of the top. So if we had done our job in EG, then I think NA would have looked like solid internationally. And I think with very small changes, we should have and could have done so. Um, and then there are some decent teams below that, but I think it's tough for the Americas this next following time, because as far as what I'm hearing, I'm not sure actually if EG changed their plans with the promoting of EG Black, but EG, Complexity, Liquid are all gonna be spending as much time as they. I think like the players
Mm-hmm.
from the teams are basically just like getting apartments in Europe moving forward, and they're
Oh
just gonna
wow.
be living there instead.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if EG is doing that, but I think that's what I heard Complexity is doing and Liquid's doing, and we at least also talked about doing that in in EG when I was there. Um, So that means even less practice against solid teams if you're from the North American region. Obviously, losing the only legend spot, losing a spot at the major. The entire RMR now becomes only an 8-team tournament instead of a 16-team tournament. That means 8 teams miss out on LAN experience, which is also a big thing. That could be really something that helps you like prosper as an individual and as a player. It's gonna be super tough to even just get to the RMR now, because again, only 8 teams. Only 4 will go through to the major, so that's obviously also like less players that get that experience and can grow from getting to the major. And Pain are now saying that they're gonna be potentially moving to Europe instead of being in Mexico.
Oh, wow.
Furia is gonna have boot camp facilities now in Malta. So yeah, it's rough. I mean, when all the top teams leave, that means that obviously you can't practice against them, so you can't learn from them in practice. Also, we are in there won't be any RMR qualifiers or anything for until next year. So that means for the entirety of this year, there's zero incentive for any decent teams to be in North America if they can afford being in Europe. At least we were like forced to have some time in North America because we needed to be here for the like RMR qualifiers and stuff like that, right? But they're gone. They're not there. So this is like the perfect time if you want to be in Europe to go to Europe. Obviously, they'll be back again next year, right? But it won't change the fact that we will now have like 6 months or something where you have way less practice opportunities. And again, yeah, RMR only being 8 teams is also like a huge thing. So yeah, it's not looking great. I think the RMR being 16 teams was huge. I think if you could get like a North American Pro League, if you get more IM Dallases, more Blast Washingtons, all that kind of stuff, right? Then that's super good because the teams will be here practicing leading up to the events and stuff like that. So that's just an opportunity for everyone. Honestly, this is a bit of a callback, but Flashpoint was the best
Yes.
thing for
It was
NACS
so good.
because we were here, like we participated as Copenhagen Flames at the
Oh,
time.
that's right. Yeah.
And like obviously we weren't like the team that everyone was looking forward to
Right.
practice against from Europe, right? Like there were teams like Mad Lions or Big or whatever, right? That were like the teams that brought the most quality. But like we were here for like a month and a half straight, and we could only practice against North American teams. So that was like you had Mad Lions, I think. In the second iteration, I think Big and I can't remember like Havu and
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
There were a couple of teams. I can't remember all of them, right? But there were maybe like 5 EU teams. Plus
Mhm.
all the NA teams, of course, were like forced to stay here for a month and a half. They couldn't go to Europe. So that probably created the best practice environment that's ever been in North America, because you like incentivize teams to be here for an extended period of time. If anyone can ever make that happen again, obviously super tough with like the tournament schedule and all that stuff, right? But that would be like the ultimate best thing that could happen to North America is incentivize European teams to be in North America for especially an extended period of time. Um, yeah, if they can pull that off, then yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah. And I think I'll just say from my own personal experience, like I started watching Counter-Strike in 2015. I think this is probably the worst I've seen in terms of the like what opportunities NA has. This is probably the worst I've ever seen. Um,
Yeah.
and like I completely agree with you. In terms of having, incentivizing teams to stay over, and I think it's a shame because I think a lot of it came down to Pro League being taken away. And also now there are no DreamHack tier 2 LAN events, that you can just like go to, that are constantly happening. Those are kind of gone now. Um, it becomes pretty difficult. And it's really difficult for tier 2 teams to even qualify for Pro League and Blast and all these other, especially Blast. So it can just be really, really challenging. Um,
Yeah.
but I think one thing that I wanted to kind of ask about was in terms of like I think the one of the biggest problems that a lot of people have with the game currently is the economy, especially just how much of a positive impact it is to just save, when situations just statistically just aren't in your favor. Um,
Mm.
and I guess what are your thoughts on how the game's being played right now? And in terms of, what maybe changes with the economy, or what do you think is the biggest thing kind of causing some of these games to kind of take a long time and drag out and maybe not be as exciting as they might have used to have been?
Yeah, I'm probably one of the worst people to ask these sort of questions to because I never really like spend energy on it because I'm just like, this is the game.
Right,
Let's just
yes.
play the game, right?
Yes.
It's like we can't, like, even if I complain
You
about the
can't change
gameplay,
the
not a whole lot
rules.
is
Yeah.
gonna, yeah. So I'm just like focused on doing it. But I can understand the argument, right? That it's like the games are too long. Like, what other sport do you like? Like a best of three can take 4 hours, and what other sport are you like sitting down watching something for 4 hours? The closest you probably get is like, there's like the Tour de France is going now, or like Formula One or something. But that's, for a lot of people, that's just something like you turn on and it's just in the background. You don't
Right.
like, and then you watch the last like 30 minutes or something,
I don't
right?
need to watch Max Verstappen win for the next 30 laps.
Yeah, so it's like, it's something you can just like check in on once in a while, and I don't think that's like how Counter-Strike plays, right? It's not supposed to be a game. You just kind of like you're supposed to be there for like all the highs and lows
Yes.
throughout the game. But I mean, personally, it is a I have I have said this opinion before, and I've received a lot of scrutiny for it. But personally, fuck pistol rounds, man. Like why are they in the game? They don't. I mean, to me, it's just like
But
like
Jam
they're
won't make it.
so. It's like pistol rounds are, and like, I don't care what anyone says. Of course, you can like be good at pistol rounds, but pistol
Yes.
rounds per definition are a lot more coin flippy than any other round in the game
Mhm.
because you have less utility. So like, you're not really. It just like makes it's just less things you can do. So you also see like way more, like compared to a gun round, right? Like in pistols, you see like 4 stacks or like people doing
Mhm.
really gimmicky shit because it's coin flippy. Like, it's not like it's hard to play a solid round because when you play a solid round of Counter Strike, you're using your utility to like buy time and get information, but you can't do that in a pistol round.
Right.
So, and pistol rounds impact the economy very heavily. A lot of times, it's like a 3 round
Mhm.
swing for something that's like, it's not an entirely coin flip, right? But it is just
Right.
more random. There's like, so to me, that sucks. That's the only thing I don't really like too much about the game. Because
Mhm.
like on one map, of course you can win if you lose both pistol rounds, but your win rate like drops significantly
Yeah.
in a map if you lose 2 pistol rounds. So I don't like that. But, and I mean, yeah, I like, there was that joke video ESL did about like CS2 where it was
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah.
like fucking guy, like people driving in cars and all that shit, right?
Mhm.
But there was that bounty mechanic, and like
Yeah.
when they were in
Yeah.
that part of the video, I thought it was like, I thought I was watching a real video. I thought this was a
Yeah,
CS2
no, I kind
update,
of did for a second too.
and I was like, I'd be like the graphics and whatever was wonky, but I was like, yeah, okay, like they might just be like, there was
Mhm.
like just dollar bills on the ground. I was like, okay, I
Yeah.
don't expect this what it's gonna look like in game, but maybe it's just like a way of showing it or whatever. But I was like, yeah, okay, I guess that makes sense. Then that could be like an incentive not to save too much anymore. Obviously, like I would be fine with saving being less powerful.
Mhm.
It would be more exciting to watch, but just viewing it as a coach, I honestly don't mind or care too much. I
Mhm.
don't mind or care too much about the length of the games either, as long as we don't have two best of threes back to back. Then
Right.
I think it's manageable. But from like a spectator point of view, I can see why you would do something about it,
Mhm.
and people are suggesting like playing MR12s and stuff like that,
Mhm.
and I can definitely see that being a good solution. But again, we need to nerf pistol rounds then, because then they will have even
Yeah.
more
More of an
like,
impact. Yeah.
yeah, if you start up 3-0 and it's like MR12 or something, then that's even more powerful. And if you lose
Yeah.
two
You've already
pistols
lost a
now,
quarter map
then
right there. Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Well, I can
then that would
say,
be crazy.
yeah, I can say EG's. I know Valorant's a different game and whatnot, and the money works a lot different. But EG's run it in the last Masters Tokyo event they went to. They were almost winning every pistol round, and then they would kind of win the third round, which is essentially a bonus round. And when teams are winning both of those rounds, like it's just wait in a system where it's MR12, like it is very difficult to win that game if you're losing pistols and bonus rounds. Like it's just hard.
I mean, like if you're playing first to 13 and you start up 6-0,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
I mean, like you're almost halfway there. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, so yeah, I don't. I like, to me that would be an issue. At least that would need to be fixed. Like the pistols are maybe that, like law starts higher or something like that. Like at least so that if you like eco the second round, then you have like you can have an AWP or whatever in round 3 or something.
Mhm.
I think stuff like that would need to be looked at. But yeah, obviously, yeah. I mean, it is also kind of boring sometimes in practice because it's like, okay, they executed B Inferno. Okay, let's save again. Let's save again.
Right.
Let's save again.
Mhm.
But yeah, to me, I don't spend too much time, energy worrying about it. It's just what we have to deal with.
Right. Well, I don't know how we're doing on time, but I do want to
We're about
say that.
an hour and 25 in. So
Oh, okay. Well, obviously, you talked about being more versatile now individually, right? Because you've done the corporate and business side of like Copenhagen Flames. Even you stepped down and coach a little bit, and now you've coached EG, a big North American organization. So I'm just curious on kind of what's your next steps personally. Obviously, nothing's concrete. Are you leaning any certain way? I know it's kind of hard, right? Because you have experience doing multiple things now,
Yeah.
but it obviously opens you up to a lot of new options. But I'm just curious, preferably for you, if you're leaning any specific way.
I mean, I'm already in conversations and talks with a couple of different potential destinations, and as I said also in the end of my HLTV article, I mean, right now I'm in talks with being a player agent, being a being like director of like performance and stuff like that, and being a head coach for a team. And I mean, the most
Mhm.
important for me, like the way I kind of see my career moving forward is I'm 31 years old now. I don't have any children or anything right now. I do have a girlfriend I've been together with for 12 years now. I hope that was correct, but I'm not sure if she watches this anyway. So uh, we'll see. But I mean, I'll probably have children in like 2 years. And honestly, like this past year with EG, it's like traveling 230 days a year and stuff like that. My girlfriend also has a career that she also enjoys and wants to
Mhm.
pursue. So I don't know if I see myself in 2 to 3 years when I'll probably have children. I don't know if I can travel as much as I need to
Right.
do working like head coach positions. So the way I kind of see it is, I do have this like boyhood dream, I guess, of being like the coach and traveling around with the team and winning
Mhm.
championships, and like that there's just something like special to it. And honestly, like the feeling you get when you win games, and like it's like
Right.
there's nothing better. It's really amazing. So I really enjoy that part of it. But I also know that at some point I probably don't see myself doing it,
Mhm.
just because personal reasons. I want to be there for my kids, and we could probably hire a nanny full time, but I don't know if that's the way I would go about it. So that just kind of like puts a timer on me, and that makes it
Mhm.
so for me, for it to be worth it for me to travel, and like also like you don't see your family, you don't see your
right.
friends.
Hmm.
I
Right.
mean, this past year with EG, I even like have a sick dad as an example, and he like
Mhm.
I barely get to see him, and that's super tough. So it has to be worth it, right? Um and also because of the timer. So like for me to be a head coach, it needs to be a team where I can see that it is realistic that I within this like time frame I have laid out for me, I need to get to a point where it can be realistic to win trophies, and I can like achieve this dream that I have. So it doesn't make sense to me to like do another Copenhagen Flames or something
Right.
like that. Because yeah, I mean, I've already proved to myself that I can like do fairly good. I can develop talent. I can do more with less, whatever. The only thing I haven't proven is that I can win titles, and so that's
Mhm.
like what's left on the bucket list, right? So it needs to be somewhere where I can see myself doing that. And then on top of that, like I want to work with esports for the rest of my life, if possible. And what I see myself doing after coaching is like probably like GM work, director of esport, director of performance, like whatever you want to call it, like some kind of that where I'm still probably involved with like the sports side of things, but more like a upper management level. And so the question is, if there are possibilities out there for me now where I can already get that job that maybe in an ideal world I get in 2-3 years, but if that position is available today, then that's of course also interesting because I mean it is something I see myself doing. Maybe in a perfect world, not today, but in 2 years. But still, you can't always get everything the way you hope for. So obviously, yeah, I would love to be a head coach of a top 10 team, but obviously those teams there's only 10 of them, and they already have coaches, so that can be difficult, right? So it's about finding out, and yeah, like finding for players' rights has always been like a passion of mine too. I think also even when I was in like Copenhagen Flames, I think the players that we had would say that they were being treated very well, and we were very considerate of their needs and stuff like that. So player agent is something that's been on my mind. I've also already negotiated contracts with players and helped them out with stuff just when I've been in like my off season, even players in like tier 1 teams. So I also have a little bit of experience in doing stuff like that. So that's also something I find very interesting. So I have some very, very, very tough decisions that I need to make. I've been fortunate enough that there's still interest in me, even after a year with poor results, and also from organizations very high up on the HLTV ladder. But it's about finding the right fit for me. Also, like let's say I could join like a top 5 team in the world, but I feel like the position I'm in is not one where I make a difference. I don't feel like I have impact in whether or not we would be winning trophies. Then that wouldn't be right for me. I wouldn't feel good about that. So it's about finding something where I wake up every day feeling challenged and working towards like a goal or whatever. So yeah, I'm the type of person I stress a lot about decisions before I make them. So right now I have a lot of stress going on in my head.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean that's kind of all the questions I've got. Current, if you have anything else.
No, I think I'm good. I know I can speak for me and Ricky both that, thank you for doing this. I think also I think you're one of the more like vocal coaches, or at least pieces of an organization that are out there, right? I think a lot of organizations like to keep things in house for the most part, especially when things are going wrong, right? They don't want to talk about what's going wrong. But I think you and Soham especially have been really good about being open about answering questions and letting the community and the fans know kind of what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's important that we all remember that we're in the entertainment industry. I mean, I know day to day, all we think about is like competitiveness and performance and all that stuff, right? And that's what's important to the players. But we're in the entertainment industry. If no one's watching, then there's no dollars on the table, and we have to go back to work a 9 to 5 job. So to me, it's I appreciate everyone that even all the guys that write that I suck at my job and I should be fired. Like without them, I would make less money, and I wouldn't be able to do this. So I mean, I wouldn't be able to travel the world and get to see all these cool places and have all these experiences I'll remember for the rest of my life. So you have to give something back is kind of my train of thought, right? And even when things go bad, I mean, of course, I even in this interview, I highlighted some things that were not so good about myself in this past year. I highlighted some things that weren't so good about Wiz, Nealan. Like we all had stuff that we needed to work on, but I still feel like you can do it in like a respectable manner. Like I don't think
Yeah.
any of the maybe some people would disagree, but I don't think anything I've said about Nealan or Wiz like condemns them either to like, oh fuck, they're terrible, they suck.
No, yeah.
And it's like the combination of us and the strengths and weaknesses we had at different times made it hard to make it work. And again, also like just the skills that I had and all that stuff, right? So I feel like we can share um without necessarily
Putting
like
someone else
breaking
down.
anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously there's some stuff that you can't share. Like
Right.
There are some people now that are like, okay, so now you're saying you sometimes had different ideas about
Yeah,
who you guys should have brought in. Like why didn't you say that?
I know,
Like,
yeah.
like we can't get out of an off season. They'd be like, yeah, this wasn't the roster I was hoping to have. You know, like
Yeah.
you can't say that. That's,
Yeah.
I mean, that's horrible, right? And even now, when I'm saying it, it's like the truth is like I did have other ideas of like players we could have brought in or whatever, right? But I might not have been correct, but at the same time, like I did accept the rosters that we had all the way through. So it's not like I was like, fuck that guy, I don't want to work with that guy or something. But it was
Yeah.
like I had some conversations that probably made more sense, but but stuff like that you can't say like while you're in it just for obvious reasons, like the
Mhm.
confidence of players and stuff like that, right? So, but yeah, I mean, yeah, to me it's just about giving back, and also it's I don't know. To me, if I was a fan, I would feel like it's way more interesting to follow if people give me something. So, and I want people to follow my career. I want people to follow the teams that I'm working for's career, because again, I mean, that's what makes it all possible. So yeah, I just want to thank you guys for giving a damn.
Yeah, I'll just briefly say at the end here, I really appreciate you in particular, because I obviously I was just kind of doing my thing, and you reached out to me, and I was very, 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 I'll always be grateful for that. Um, and I'm like Current was saying, you guys have probably been, this is probably like, shockingly, probably been the most open communication with like coaches and staff just in general with a community, I think, that I've seen in CS in a long time. Um, and, you know, Me and Kern have also talked about how, I think doing this podcast and kind of just talking about the team and constantly following everything that's happening and whatnot, you become very emotionally invested in not only the players, but just as players, but also just everyone as people. And so, obviously, as I said it in the last episode, and I'll say it here again. It's just, I really hope and believe truly that everyone that was associated with EG this last year or so like has a lot of talent and can go places and are great people. I unfortunately was not able to meet everyone in Dallas, but obviously I talked to Current and stuff, and so just really grateful for being able to talk with you guys, for having such open communication, and very hopeful that everyone's able to kind of find where they need to be and kind of find success in whatever they do. So
Yeah, appreciate it, and I also hope the same for all the guys, because it was a good bunch of guys that I've enjoyed the past year, even though I think in a lot of other team environments, with the results we've had, the last year would have been miserable. But of course, I've had my headaches about like why we can't perform more, but it's been enjoyable, and I have a lot of nice memories that I will cherish for a long time, and also feel like I made friends that I'll stay in contact with for a long time. So that's that's something I've been very grateful for, and I also wish all of them the very best. And of course, also wish you guys the best. I don't know how much we will interact moving forward, because if I go somewhere else, I don't know if you guys would care at all. So we'll.
oh,
We'll care,
listen,
man.
we'll care.
We care. We
I
care
can tell
now.
from experience. Like I still follow EG's old Rocket League team that they had in January that they got rid of. I still follow those players to see what happens with them. So
All right.
I assure you, I'm not gonna forget.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
No, we won't forget. We'll keep following for sure. We I mean, I know I do, and
As
Busy
long as
does
you
for
keep
sure.
shit
Wish me the
posting
best.
against HexT, I think we'll
Oh
still
yeah.
keep in, we'll
Yeah,
still
I mean
keep following. So
they'll probably continue a little bit for a while. We'll see. Like maybe we get to go up against each other in a couple of tournaments too. That would be fun.
That'd be funny. Yeah.